My name is Garman Herigstad, and I've been using Houdini since version 1.0. One thing that I like to do is to learn how to build my own desktop. And it's good to build a desktop because when we create a project, we need to know why certain windows are used for. What I'm going to do is build something very simple and show you what each of those desktops are used for as we build it. First thing I'm going to do is create a new desktop. So I'm going to pick new desktop. And that gives me a big open window. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is go up here in that pin, and I'm going to change that to a number 1. And this pinning system that Houdini has, windows that are linked together. So like if you're in one part of Houdini, all the different window types follow each other. One of the problems with people new to Houdini is that their windows become unsynced and they don't know where they are because they're trying to change a number here, but they don't see something change somewhere else, or they're selecting the wrong item. The easiest way around fixing that is to change all these numbers to, you can pick any one of these numbers. They all have to be the same number. I'm going to pick number 1. So the first window that we have is this big viewport. And I'm going to split this into 3 horizontals. So I go up to the top right here, the icon that says Pane tab, and I'm going to split left right. And then I'm going to do it again. Split left right. Okay. So now I have 3. So I'm going to go up to the top left one here, and I'm going to change that to be a tree view. That's a way of listing all of our geometries. The left one I'm going to split off to be top bottom, and the bottom one I'm going to pick a text port. That's under miscellaneous text port. The text port is for typing Houdini commands, or what are called HScript commands. I'm going to grab this vertical bar and just slide it to the left, and take this one and slide it down. Okay. Now we have these 2 windows here. The left one's going to become our viewer, so I'm going to is already set to our viewer, so we need to change that. But on the bottom, I'm going to add another set of panels. So I'm going to split this one to be top bottom, and the bottom one I'm going to change this to be a geometry spreadsheet. Okay, and I'm going to slide this one down. And the right one here, I'm going to split this one to be top and bottom. And the top one is going to be my network viewer. And my bottom one is going to be my parameters. Okay. So these are the main set of windows that you kind of need to have for like minimum work in Houdini. We have a scene view window. We have our network editor on top. We have our parameters down at the bottom. We have our tree view list, which makes it easy to move around Houdini. And we have a text port for saving things. Now I'm going to save my file. So I'm going to go Files, Save As. Now, I made all these changes to this desktop called Desk, which was our starting point. I created a new one. So I'm going to pick this one, Save Current Desktop As, and I'm going to call this Houdini Tips Desktop. Okay. And it could be any name, and you can have space between the words. So now that desktop appears in my list. So let's begin by creating geometry. Now we want to create a new object here, a couple of new objects. We can create them up here in a network editor or here in the viewer. So in the viewer I can hit tab and I'm going to type torus. Hit return, and sometimes you have to hit return twice. I kind of do it automatically. Now this is the network editor. You see it has the word objects in there. It tells us what part of Houdini in there, but the name of this window is really the network editor. And these are the parameters down below. So this tells me where my object is. Now typically when we do effects, most of the effects animation, or almost all of the effects animation, is done inside this node. So you can see I selected this node over here. When I selected it there, it also turned yellow over here. I could open that up with a little plus sign, And you can see that, and there's another plus sign, and I can open up. And so I have a torus inside a torus object. I can click here, and you notice that it took me down into this level of Houdini. Okay. Now I'm going to show a couple of preferences as I go. So I'm going to go up to Preferences, start with the top one. I'm going to pick Color Panes Headers with Network Context and just hit Apply and Accept. Okay. And what happened, if you had a good eye, you notice that these windows, the top of the pane turned green. Now I can maneuver around Houdini. One, I can go up here and see they turn blue. And then I could go back down thick. I can go back down collecting that, or I can also pick this. I can hit the I key for me going in. They turn green. I can hit with my mouse over here, I can hit the U key and go up, or I can just double click on it. So a couple of ways of moving in and out. I can also click on this word OBJ, and that takes me up to that level. Now I'm going to save my file, and I can go up here and hit File, Save. Now if I'm on version 1. If I want to upgrade to version 2, I could do it the clumsy way by picking Save As, and then go over and change that to version 2. Okay. Now one of the things I like to do is have this text board open, and I'll type this command. It's an HScript command. It's called MWRITE, MWrite. And it's space minus I space. And then I'm going to hit enter. And then what this did is that it upgraded it to version 3. I can see the number here. It's pretty faint light gray, but I can see that number there. So now I can go down here if I want to upgrade my file and save it. I just did that. Or if I just want to overwrite my file, I can do that. So this is, for me, this is much faster having this little window open just for upgrading and saving my file. In this text board, I can also find out what Houdini file I'm working on. I can type $. I need to put the word echo in front of that, echo. And it showed me the name of my Houdini file, but without the $HIPE. Or in my case, I'm using Houdini Indie, so it's HIPLC. So it shows me that name. Pretty convenient. So now I have these major desktops that I like to use a lot. Now I'm going to slide this window over here. There's a couple more desktops that I like to use. And one of them is a material editor. And some of the desktops have it up here on the right, so I'm going to add it. Now I'm going to add a new tab, so I'm not going to pick that to make a new window. I'm going to click on this plus sign here, and that's going to make another sub window. So I'm going to click. I get that similar list, and I'm going to material palette. So now I have that. Now to switch between these two windows, I have to come up here and click like that. Now the material palette doesn't have the little pin symbol or the little circle with the number. It's got a question mark, but it doesn't have that as this one has, so we don't have to worry about it. Now if I want to drag a material to my object, I can go and I can drag that over this geometry and see it turn color. And then it appears in this list. So I have gold. Okay. So I just move back from the palette. I'm going to go back up to the object level of Houdini. Now I'm going to create a grid, a floor. And I'm going to do it this time. I'm going to do it in this window. So I'm going to hit Tab. Well, I guess it's going to do it this window. Tab, Grid, Enter. And then it created a floor for me. Now my camera, the middle mouse on the scrolling mouse on my camera, it's not doing anything. Sometimes I have to hit the space bar first. So I just tap the space bar. Middle mouse will pan around or as a track around, zoom in and out or dolly in and out. It's actually dolly in and out and rotate. Okay. And down below here, you can see it says down here, it says left mouse tumble. So the rotation is called tumble. Right dollies and so you have to go back. It disappeared. So thanks. Now these objects here are called handles, and we can scale things. And because I'm on the object level here, if I have my, so let's say I got to pick the red one, it's rotating. So I'm rotating the grid, and you can see it's changing the rotation there. So I'm going to zero that out. One nice thing about the parameters is that I can hit the tab key and go from one to another. So that's pretty cool. Now, if I want to scale my grid smaller, the temptation would be to scale it here. But I'm actually going to go inside. I'm going to select the node, hit the I key on my keyboard, or you could double click, or you could just select it and hit enter. And then I'm going to change my size here. Now, I could go in and change each of these numbers, but another cool thing about Houdini's interface is if I middle click on here, it brings up this slider panel, and it defaulted to 0.1. And if I drag to the left, it scales it down by, if I go to smaller, 0.01, it's doing it by 1 centimeter. I'm going to return this to 5 by 5, so I hit 5, tab, 5, keyboard. Now it has rows and columns here. Now I can change both of them if I wanted both to change. So one cool thing about Houdini is that I can have one number, one channel linked to another. So I'm going to right click on the word rows, and that's called a label. This is the value, or the actual parameter. I'm going to right click on it. If you see, if I just hold my mouse over there, down below it says parameter, and it says it's called rows. So I right click on that and I pick copy parameter. And then I go down to the one right below columns, and I'm going to pick paste relative reference. And then this is the name for the rows. You see, so it's wrapped in this CH function. So CH is for channel, and then left parenthesis, double quote, then the word rows, which is the name we found there, and then another double quote and a right parenthesis. So now, whenever I change the rows, the columns change. Now I could click this again. I can click back and forth. So now I can see my numbers are in sync. Okay. Well, let's get a couple of basic things before we finish off this introduction to the desktop. So I'm on a camera, and one way to pick a camera is you can go up here, pick new camera. I can also hit the tab key. If I'm at the object level, I can hit the tab key and I can type cam for camera. Now, one thing that you'll notice is that when I'm in this part of Houdini, I can pick a camera. So click, and it put a camera down, and then put the camera right in the center of the universe. I'm going to scoot that forward, where I can see my camera. And I can look through the camera, cam 1, look through the camera. I'm going to raise my camera up, and I'm going to look down on it, negative rotate X. Okay, so now I have that. Now, in the top level of Houdini, I could create a camera. I'm going to put this over on the side. But if I go inside my, and I hit tab, and I type cam, there's no camera. So these are context sensitive. So Houdini uses the word context to describe all these different parts that we're in. So now I'm inside this geometry level. See up here in the top right, it says geometry. And if I hit the tab key, these are all the things that I can pick to add a node. Now I am inside the geometry node, so I'm down inside. Now I'm going to go back up for a second. So now I've assigned a material to my torus. And if I go select the torus object here, go to the render tab, this is where my material is assigned. So we can assign a material up here on the object level, but we can also assign a material inside the geometry. Typically, Houdini renders much more efficiently if you put it at the top level. Now let's go grab another material. So I select material green, just clicked it and dragged it over to the right. Now I didn't do it at the top level. So if I go back to my list, so I'm going to click object here, and my grid, go to my render tab, there's no material there. We're going to assign the material at another level of Houdini. So I'm going to go into my grid, and I'm going to attach a material operator, tab, MAT, and then if the first one's highlighted in orange, I could just double click. Okay, now I'm going to connect these two. It's called wiring. So now I have my grid, and the data flows down a material, and I'm going to pick my material here. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to pick that, and I'm going to pick material metal. Okay, so now it turns green. Now I can assign more than one material, but we need a group. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to insert a node in between. Now if I right click on that circle and then I'm going to type group and enter twice, and it made this group node. I'm going to select the group node and I want to make my group based on a bounding region. So I'm going to click enter. You see it made a rectangle there. I'm just going to middle click scale the rectangle. So I have this group 1. Now I like naming things to be as convenient as possible. The name of my node here is group 1, but the name of the group that's created is also called group 1. And, and I can have an information box to look at that. So if I hold my mouse over that node, pick the and then I look down here and I see groups. Now, and the primitive group name is group 1. And close that for a minute. So you can see in my group parameters, I'm grouping parameters, not points, not edges, not vertices, but primitives. And it made that name. So now I can go here and I can specify the group. So now it just assigned a material to that group. Now the name is kind of clumsy because I really want this to be called like group green. So I'm going to rename it here group green. Okay. But the name still didn't update. So there's a good trick in Houdini. I can type $ capital O capital S. And when I do that, go to my group node, you can see it changed the name of the group to group green. So $OS is exactly the same as that. That's what it is. OS is the operator name. But my group went away, so I have to go down here, delete group 1 because I no longer have a group 1. If I pick group, it appears in this list on the right. Tab GRP, group OUP, combine. Once it's selected, I can arrow down, enter, enter. Now I want to put that in between here, so I can just take that and drag that over that, and you can see it inserted itself. So now the name here of the new group, we're going to make a new group based on the old group. And the name of the group is going to go here, so I'm going to put $OS. That's going to create a silly name called group combine. So I'm just going to rename that to be group combine silver or platinum. And I'm going to have that based on the old group. So I'm going to pick group green. So now that equal, so they're both the same group. I'm going to tell it they're not equal. So now my group silver is everything except the group green. So now I go down my material list. I can add another material. So there's a little plus sign there. Click that. I get a number 2. So number 1, number 2. I'm going to add a null, and I'm going to add that to the end. And I'm going to call this out. Okay. This is going to be my output, my last part of my chain. I'm going to go up to the top level. Now I have almost everything I need, but I need a light. And I'm going to add 2 kinds of light. Now we're almost ready to render. We need a node to control our rendering. Now in the output part of Houdini, we click here. So we're moving from the OBJ into the output. You notice there's no geometry there. the geometry is a subset of OBJ. So I'm going to go to out, O-U-T, and I can create a new render node. There's a couple ways. I can hit the tab key and type mantra. We're going to show mantra rendering in this lesson. But I could also go up here to pick render, create a bundle, and I want to pick mantra physical base render. I renamed that node, and I completely renamed the node. And I'm a big fan of never renaming the node or never renaming the first part of the node, but changing the name after the node. So like I'll add a description afterwards. And for me, it just makes it faster for me to see what all my nodes are. If I'm passing my file to somebody else, it's going to make it easier for them. But in this case, for the mantra nodes, this is one of the rare times where I ever changed the full name of the node. So you can see down here, that's the name that I've renamed it to. Now, I have options here for rendering, and we're just going to pick the basic ones. A camera, there's a box, cam 1, that's the name of the camera I picked. I can't pick a light to render through there. Now, it's going to render to disk, and you can see there's this option checked, create intermediate directories. Now what it's going to do, it's going to render the Houdini file, but it's going to render to a subfolder called render. And I actually like making a subfolder within a subfolder. So I'm going to drag these two, copy, paste, copy, click there, click in front of the $sign, paste, add another slash. So now when it renders, it's going to render a file into here. So it's going to make a subfolder. So the name of the rendered file and the name of the folder and the name of the file are the same thing. Now I need to go pick my objects list. So I'm going to go to this tab called objects. And I'm going to get rid of this star in candidate objects. I don't like to do that. You'll learn more why later, but I like using this forced objects. And I'm going to pick my grid and my torus and then accept. So now the only two objects that are going to render are those. In my candidate lights, I can get rid of the star there, and I can force pick my lights. And when you begin setting up complicated renders in Houdini with layers and backgrounds and shadow pass renders and fire renders and smoke renders and particles and different kind of layers, you're not going to want to use candidate objects. You're going to want to use the force objects. Trust me. Okay. So now we're actually ready to render. I'm going to go up and save my file. Or I could have done it down here and upgraded it by arrow up and enter. Okay. Now we can preview what our render is going to look like a couple of ways. I'm going to create a new tab, so we're still building a desktop, and that desktop is going to be called Render View. Okay. And it has a few things on it. It has the name of the mantra node that we're going to use. And since I only had one mantra node, it automatically picked it. I don't have to pick the camera. If my camera is defined correctly over here, I don't have to pick it there. And once I pick that, I can hit render. Now this is going to be a progressive render, so it's going to slowly increase in detail. So it has to think about the geometry first. Now if I hold on the shift key, I can draw an arrow over just part of it, and so it's just going to update that. I'm going to go to Houdini's compositing view, and I'm going to make a noise texture, but I can't see my compositing, so we need another viewer. So I'm going to go to new type, pick composite view, and then that one came up with the pin, so I'm going to make sure I click it to be a 1. So now the top level here, this is under a part of Houdini called IMG. We can see it over here in our list. And if I go inside here, I can create a new node. I'm going to hit tab and I'm going to call it noise. Now I'm going to stop my render preview so it doesn't do rendered in the background. Go to my scene view. There's one other way to preview your render. I'm going to save my file. Make sure I don't hit the wrong button. And if I go to my left part of my viewport, you can see that window opens up. And there's a little icon down there that looks like a film sprocket, film reel. And I'm going to click uh, desktop demo and right click on there. And a new window is going to pop up. It's just going to be called mplay. It's thinking about it, and then it begins rendering. Now this render isn't a progressive render, but I can click around and tell it to render the part of the picture that I want it to. So that's nice, but every time it renders, it's basically showing me what the final render is going to look like. Now this doesn't save it to disk, and neither does the render view. Now I've built this file, a simple file, but what it shows you is that each of these different panes has a specific purpose for doing something. And so like we have the scene view, we had the render view for previewing, compositing view for compositing images in Houdini, animation editor. We can look at the graph of the motion. And down below we have this geometry spreadsheet. We have our tree view, our text port, and our windows. We have our network editor up in the top right, our parameters down in the bottom right, our scene view in the middle top, and geometry spreadsheet there like I mentioned before. And then the different contexts of Houdini. We have the OBJ, which is kind of like the top level view of Houdini. And if we go inside a geometry node, then we're inside geometry land. We have the output part of Houdini for rendering, having our rendering set up. We have the image part of Houdini. And back to our object level. Now I haven't gone through everything, obviously. And for me, it was really good to be able to learn what each one of these windows did. The trouble is that if you're brand new to Houdini, you open up the file, you see all these windows, and you're like, where am I? And the one gotcha that gets most beginners is that if you use the pin system, they can become unpinned and unhinged and unconnected, and you get lost. So that's why I still do this for myself. I always make sure they follow a number. And if I have a double screen, I might have one set number one and one set number two. But this was just the overview of how to build these windows and and then what they do. So not only how to make it, but what they do. Now, if you find this to be helpful, please share this with your friends, other people learning Houdini, even some senior people that are using Maya and they want to transition over to Houdini. And the hardest part is just understanding the GUI at the beginning. And this method of introducing the GUI when I teach it has really had some good consequences down the road for helping my students pick up the program quicker. Share the file, share the link, share my playlist.